Okay, now we're into tools and techniques, or techniques and tools. The goal here is to talk about the specific things that you can do to get to an information architecture. The first thing you can do is you can just buy an industry template. If the industry you're in has a template, whether it's healthcare or it's energy or whatever it is, you can get a predefined start. Well, there are a handful of these, and candidly, most of them aren't super great, and yes, I know, super great, but they will get you in the right ballpark. They'll help you standardize around key industry terms. They'll identify the important metadata that you need to capture, and often they'll include prototypical breakdowns, or the ways that you should categorize things. So while I don't think that in most cases an industry template's the right end answer, it's a great way to get started. Okay, a couple of mental processes that we have to think about and walk through. So before I describe chunking, I want to say that if you were to give a baby a set of dots, and you say there's 3 or 5, 10 dots, and you're moving them all around together on the screen, all the same way, all the same time, the baby will track those dots, those set of dots, as one item. And if you were to take one dot and keep the rest of them still and have one dot dart off or go in a different direction, what you'll find is the baby gets really confused because the baby has done what we as humans do, and that is we chunk things together. We try to simplify all the details into things that make sense for us. And we'll consider a set of things as a single item. So, for instance, while an approval may actually be an approval for several sets of documents, several different documents, we'll treat that as one set in the approval process. That makes it simpler for our brains to process. We talked earlier about mental models, and we don't have the ability to process an infinite number of things. So it's when we see a flock of birds, we treat those as a single entity. We treat the entire flock in our brains as if it's a single entity. And it's the same kind of thing that we do if we're putting together a flowchart and we say, get a job, right? That's maybe an old Sha Na Na song, but it's a very simplification of the things that you need to do to get a job. And maybe that may be responding to ads and interviews and so on and so forth. We want to track that as one thing. That's chunking. That's putting multiple things into one bucket. So reduction uses chunking, and it uses it so that we can understand the situation. So it's about the simplification process. So chunking is about how do we get things together, and reduction is, well, how do we make it simpler? This is why we have stereotypes. We all say that stereotypes are bad. Well, actually they're not. They can be bad, but stereotyping is a natural process that we do to simplify our world. Einstein said, make things as simple as possible, but no simpler, right? So, yeah, he's famous for E equals MC squared. He always was trying to make things simpler than they started, less complex. But he never tried to simplify things too much, because then they wouldn't make any difference. Because then it wouldn't matter. They wouldn't be meaningful. So what does this have to do with the taxonomy or with information architecture? Well, a taxonomy is about the partitioning. It's about refining things into buckets and making a decision whether something should be in A bucket or B bucket. Which side of the fence does it sit on? The idea is that if we can come up with meaningful ways to partition things, we're going to find that the cognitive load of organizing it's going to be lower. People don't have to think so much about what the prototype is and where does this fit. Our goal is to get down to something that's really, really simple. Now, years and years and years ago, we believed that we were going to have really accurate voice recognition. And we still struggle with that today. If you were to run this course through one of the automated tools, one of the speech tools like Dragon, you'd find that it misses quite a bit of my words, and not because I'm slurring. We have a problem that the larger the vocabulary is, the harder it is for a computer to recognize speech. We recognize speech in lots of different ways. If you have a small vocabulary, if you say, for instance, know that people are only going to say digits, 0 through 9, well, that's a very easy speech problem to solve. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to create smaller problems, smaller decisions, smaller questions that we can solve easier. Now, here are a couple of examples of taxonomic breakdowns. We're going to do this set, and then I've got another one for you here in a second. But this is just to give you a sense for the ways that you can do these breakdowns. So you can do it by power and authority. So you have president and vice president. How does the divisions or directors and all that stuff break down? You can do it from evolution, kingdom, phylum, genus, class, order, something. Anyway, you can break it down by evolution. You can do it by whole and part. For instance, there's computer, and inside a computer is a hard drive. You can do period and event. You can say it's the 1980s and it's parachute pants, which I really like parachute pants. I wish they'd come back. They were slick, though. You'd always slide off your chair. The other thing you can do is general to specific. So is it an ocean, or is it the Indian Ocean? Or it's a group and a member. It's Republicans and George Bush. The goal here is just to give you some ideas for ways that you can break down information, because sometimes I think we get stuck and only, knowing departments and subdepartments and so forth. This just gives you a different idea of how to break things down. Now, one other way to do this is the idea of breaking things down by different facets, and this comes from a book called Organizing Knowledge by Patrick Lamb. And the idea is that these different experts, Ranganathan, Lamb, Rosenfield, Morville, Tawana, Werman, all looked at different ways that you can break things down. And then this graph here maps them together. So you'll see that in several different ways that people tend to break things down, people or personality or audience comes as a part of those kind of standard breakdowns. And the next one is matter and things and products and so forth. So personality or person, matter, energy, so activity cycles, what part of the activity is it? What phase is it? Space, in terms of location and geography, those sorts of things. Time, how are they temporally related? Is it before or after or coincident with? How do you break things down in time? There's just a different way to break things down. You can look at it by subject matter or topic or domain. If you've got tiers of pricing, that's another way to do it. You can also do it by alphabet, which I think is a little lame, and hierarchy or scale and magnitude. So different ways that you can create the facets or the ways that you're breaking things down. No matter how you create your taxonomy, you need a way to validate it. How do you know whether your taxonomy is good or not? Well, we'll talk about card sorts some more, about a closed card sort and how that is the validation. But here are some really simple ways that you can try to validate your taxonomy. First of all, is it intuitive? Is it easy to navigate and use? Is it unambiguous? So does it offer alternatives or not? You don't want it to give you two alternatives for the same thing, because then people will get confused on where they file stuff. Is it hospitable? Can it accommodate all content? You may remember we talked about this with the Dewey Decimal System. Dewey Decimal, for all its faults, is very hospitable to new content, even stuff that it didn't know existed when it was created. Consistent and predictable. And the idea here is that people get a sense for the underlying architecture, the underlying approach that was being used to develop the information architecture, to develop the taxonomy. And so once you get that mental model in your head, it's easier to work with. Think about this. Microsoft Office. For better or for worse, it has a very common feel to the way that it interacts. You've got common ribbons, and they behave the same way. Once you've learned Word, picking up Excel or PowerPoint is easy because it's consistent and predictable in the way that things will work. All right, another way to think about this. And yes, you're getting lots and lots of different approaches, and the idea is that this is the Chinese menu, and you can pick what you want to figure out which things work for you. So we're going to look at how you organize your physical space, consider how you organize a digital space, and connect all these pieces together so that you can think about how you do things physically and how that would relate if you're doing that in an electronic world. There are a couple of situations where the mapping doesn't work very well because physical objects and electronic objects are a little different, but we'll talk about those as we go through. First of all, we want to do garage organization. First of all, you have to understand the law of horizontal surfaces. Now, if you have a kitchen peninsula or counter or table, you know this law is true, and that is that horizontal spaces fill first. That people will put stuff on a peninsula or on a table, and it fills off. Anybody that's got kids is constantly cleaning off their table or peninsula because there's always something on there. Same thing happens in a garage. So there are certain electronic places which are horizontal spaces. Everybody wants to be on the homepage, but not everybody can be on the homepage. In a garage, you'll have small containers for small things and large containers for large things. Racks for containers and hanging areas for hand tools. So as you're thinking about how does your overall taxonomy fit together, you may realize that there are different approaches in different areas. You may decide that you need one thing, which is about someone's relationship with the organization, and another one for dealing with customers. But you may decide that for whatever reason, you also need a manufacturing area. That's okay as long as it makes sense. All right, kitchen organization. And this is about nothing. There is no one right answer. Now, whether you put your silverware to the left or the right of your sink, or if it's to the left or the right of your stove, it's still a kitchen. People will figure it out. Glasses go somewhere in one of the cabinets, right? Every organization may be different, and no kitchen's going to be perfect, but overall, we can kind of maneuver around, right? We have the ability to see the similar characteristics between kitchens and feel our way through it. Now, the other thing about a kitchen, which is unique, is it's the only place that you consistently find a junk drawer. You typically don't have junk drawers in your bathroom. You don't have junk drawers in your bedroom. For whatever reason, the kitchens end up with the all other things. One of the interesting things about the kitchen is that the junk drawer exists, and it's that random catch-all. You may have to figure out where in your taxonomy that random catch-all is going to be. Okay, computer organization. Oh, lack of organization. There's your local drives and network drives and desktops. Hey, that's flat space. That's your horizontal space. How many people have got stuff on their desktop? You've got My Documents. The good news here is you've got search. And search is the all-powerful thing that is going to help you find your information. Now, we've got that in electronic form because it's a computer. And as we get to an intranet, hopefully we've got a powerful search tool. I've mentioned card sorting a couple of times, and I know that it's overdue for me to talk about it. Just going to do this quickly. There's two types of card sorting. There's an open card sort, and there's a closed card sort. The beautiful thing about card sorts is they're the most effective way of creating a taxonomy. Once you know who your audience is and what you're trying to get accomplished, card sorting can be very powerful for getting things done. Okay, we start with an open card sort. We get multiple groups of 2 to 5 people, and the goal is for them to try and organize information into buckets. We hand them a set of cards, which are categories of documents. These are the output of our content inventory. And then we ask them to organize the cards, and typically we'll give them Post-it notes or some other color of card that they can use for the categories. The process is pretty simple. Oftentimes, we'll talk through it so that we make sure that we understand how they've done their card sorting and what's important to them. And then we need to test it. Testing an open card sort is easy. We just turn the process over. We get a different set of folks than did the open card sort. We hand them the cards and the categories. And then we ask them to put the cards into the categories. So basically, we've flipped over the process, and they're trying to put things into place. And the way you score this is -1 for cards they can't file and -2 for cards they put in the wrong spot, or at least a different spot than the first group. Those are telling you where your taxonomy is weak. And so you can look for these areas and see if there's ways to improve that or different approaches you can try. All right, I know that was a lot and we blew through the last little bit, but that is how you can do organization.